what's the secret to your victory? Is when tribulation comes, understand this. God loves me. God, you are good to me. Your mercies endure over my life. I will sing of your kindness. I will sing of your love. One thing I will not question is your love for me and your kindness, and I will worship you. And the song I'm going to sing is a song of your love and your compassion, all right, for me as a person. And this is what Satan is trying to get you away, to think, to say, why have you forsaken me? Why, if God was God, all right, why will this happen to me? Why should this happen? And all of that. And you begin to question, all right, God's presence, God's love, God's attribute, and start getting offended in God. Now, let me tell you a story that is really personal, all right, to me, because I witnessed this. And somebody sent it from the community groups to a minister in church, and as a testimony also, and then she sent it to me. And I want to read this out here. And it was, this person had an experience, all right, of losing a loved one. And let me say this here. The biggest test any Christian can go through, the hardest thing to understand, the hardest thing to comprehend, all right, when it comes to your faith walk, is the loss of a loved one. That somebody, I'm not talking about an elderly person that I've gotten there, I'm talking about somebody young and all of that, and you lose that loved one there. That is, Kenneth Hagin said, the first reason why people walk away from God, primary reason, first one, is the loss of a loved one. And people look at it and tell themselves that somebody lost a child or lost. Look, they look at it and tell themselves that, look, where is God? And all this. The pain. Right? So there's one thing as a Christian you must never do. And I've seen people do this. So preach faith without compassion. To make a person who lost a loved one think that is because, you don't have proper faith in God. When you, your own self, has not gone through it. Do you understand what I'm saying here? And you start saying things. I know somebody who lost a loved one. I know, look, he fasted for an entire year. Then you tell that kind of person that, you don't know faith, you don't know all of that, and say cruel things. And bring condemnation and add more things to that kind of person. What you should be doing is to be on your knees that that person doesn't get separated from the love that God has for that person. That's what Jesus is saying, that he's interceding, that there be no separation. Now, here's the story here. This person said, before I joined, all right, the grief, all right, it's called grief and relief community group. I was in a very unstable state emotionally and spiritually. I was on the verge of doing some very crazy things. Honestly, I was really down, tired, and had loads of unanswered questions. My down state drove me to check out if the church, that's Covenant Nation, had a community group for people like me who were struggling with the loss of a loved one. I was literally ready to write to pastor if there wasn't. My surfing the net and finding out about as the Grief and Relief community group, for me was an answer to one of my prayers and proof that God was leading me. Says, upon joining the group and listening to the facilitators, the turnaround day for me was 23rd of November, 2021. During one of the weekly sessions, when a speaker, wrote Mrs. Bolanle Shobali, she's now Mrs. Bolanle DG Jemio, was invited to share her story and encourage us. Then she uttered the words, God cannot mismanage my life, and I refuse to judge God by one unpleasant event. These words pierced my heart, and I've held onto them since that session. Now, this woman she's speaking about is a minister in church, Bolanle. All right? Now, let me tell you this, that said that I refuse to judge God by this one event. Let me tell you what happened to her. And she still held on in the face of it, that I refuse to judge God. Her young husband, was on the way to church that morning. They decided to use an ATM on the way. And people on bike were going past, decided to snatch the bag of his wife. He turned around as a woman to ask them and challenge them. And he was a marksman, because the doctor said he was a marksman, all right, somebody who knew what he was doing. One of the young guys put the gun through his shoulder blade and fired directly into his heart. His heart split into 9 parts. This was right before her own eyes. She carried him into a car, rushed him to hospital. Listen, I went to the hospital. I'm telling you, this was, in fact, I will tell them today, it was one of the hardest days, if not the hardest day for me in ministry. They literally had to carry her in tears. She couldn't walk. They carried her like this. She was dragging her feet, shouting. And in the midst of that, you say, I will not judge God. What have you gone through? You say they sacked you. You are scattering the whole place. You want to convey, everything is scattering. They say you lost 500,000. Nobody can rest. God, no, heaven too mustn't rest. I said they had to literally carry her to the place with 2 young children. And she looked and said, this was this guy chap is saying here, and said, I will not judge God. And still put her faith in the love that God has for her in the midst of death. One day she came to meet me and she said, look, she was talking about God's faith. She said, when people said widow, she said, Pastor, you know sometimes this widow thing, they make it look like you have lost your life when you've lost your husband. It's not like this now. All right? She still came out, was doing extremely well, buying property in choice areas. All right? In this Lagos, real properties. Doing extremely well. Buying properties abroad. And eventually, she met somebody. All right? In short, they're happily married. It's like their families were made from heaven before they met. And she experienced being more than a conqueror. Because she judged God as a loving father. That's why Jesus said, I have prayed that when tests come, you will say, God, you are faithful. And still show. That's what I've said this here. I haven't ever seen a Christian who went through a test and instead of getting bitter, worshipped God, that did not come out to something bigger than that. But you start throwing tantrums, start shouting. Right? And that's what Jesus' intercession is all about.